still looks like something's grabbing it from underneath and pushing up on it, flipping it around and dragging it down, like if it was an animal. Jerks it. Horned sea monster washes ashore in Spain. Live, this is One for the Record. I'm Diana, and today is August 25th, 2013, and here are your news updates for today. Not a lot of news, but I am attaching Dr. Bill Deagle from Thursday, I believe it is. Friday's isn't up yet. I'll try to get that tonight, after all this, and try to put it up tomorrow. Alright, breaking news, breakingnews.com. Let's see what we got going on here. Cleveland, 3 hours ago, 3 rescued, 1 person still missing in water rescue. That's come out of WKYC. Also, let's see what we got here. Earthquake, magnitude 4.8, 9 kilometers from San Carlos, Colombia, USGS, 2 hours ago. Also, Yosemite officials make additional closures as precaution because of air quality as rimfire rages nearby. LA Times, 2 hours ago. Flash flood warning issued for Las Vegas and other parts of Clark County, coming out of Weather Channel, 2 hours ago. Deer fire near Deer Creek, 12 miles east of Los Molinos, California, is now 10,310 acres and 35% contained, coming out of Cal Fire. Also, what else we got going? More than 40 passengers escape as chartered bus goes up in flames. On way back to Detroit from Washington, D.C., coming out of the Free P. Was that the Free Press? Free P. 45 minutes ago. Also, rimfire near Yosemite is now 143,980 acres and 7% contained. That's 44 minutes ago, coming out of Cal Fire. Also, Fernando remains a tropical storm with winds of 50 miles an hour and a minimum pressure of 1001 MB. That's coming under W Underground. That's it for the breaking news. Okay, Nothing new on the Extinction Protocol 2012. Nothing new on the Watchers. So let's go into the E&E News, Energy News. Let's try going into US-Canada first. That seems to work better that way. We'll see if there's something new going on. Maybe. It's pretty late at Sunday evening. Here we go. E&E News, Energy News. US-Canada. Alaska newspaper today. Concerned Fukushima nuclear waste is tainting our salmon. Worried about impact on humans. Scientists urged to conduct tests. Okay, I don't know. Let's check something else. Now that's all there is there. Japan, Fukushima. TV. Sinking ground of Fukushima plant caused serious leakage of extremely contaminated water. What a question mark. Tank may have deformed when land subsided. Also, contamination now spiking in seawater off Fukushima plant. Asahi reports up to 18-fold increase in a week. I think we reported on that. Alrighty then. So it's 2 days down of the weekend. I'll see you again tomorrow. I had to replay it. Yeah, I guess Max said no. When I was asking him, I forgot what I was asking him, but he said no. That dog talks, I'm telling you. Alrighty then. Take care. I'll see you again tomorrow on the flip side. Be prepared for anything. Be safe. And stay tuned. I have more things for you to watch. Alrighty then. Have a good one.
Okay, welcome back. Hour 2. Dr. Bill Deagle is with us this hour. Dr. Bill has many things to say about many things. We're going to plow through a bit of an agenda tonight. We've got a lot of topics. As you probably have noticed, and I'm not taking credit for this, I think it's all of you folks who use what I put up on Rense.com and keep blasting it all over the world, sending the information around. As you know, the Western mainstream media essentially has completely obfuscated, buried, covered up the catastrophe, the absolute catastrophe that continues to worsen at Fukushima. It is worse than ever, and it is going to get worse than it is now. You can just take that to the bank. The latest stories, let me just read the headlines and we'll get to Bill here. Japan. Fukushima. Now this is the Japan Nuclear Regulatory Agency there, all right? It's their NRC. It's same thing we have, but it's Japanese. Japan. Fukushima is being called, and this is a quote, a house of horrors, incredibly frightening by the Japanese NRC. House of horrors, incredibly frightening. They don't know what the heck to do with it. They literally do not. Okay? This is essential that you understand that. Furthermore, UPI is now reporting Fukushima is nearing a worst-case scenario. Mainstream media is reporting no one knows where the missing Fukushima Daiichi cores are. That's 3 100-ton sections, pieces of melted down reactor fuel. They don't know where those corium are, in fact. It's that bad, and it is getting worse all the time. TEPCO, after 2.5 years, is finally now begging for the world scientific community to help it. 2.5 years too late, TEPCO. You've ruined the Pacific Ocean. They admitted, TEPCO did about 5 months ago now, that 400 tons a day of deadly radioactive water, and we're talking about multiple nuclides, different radionuclides in this water, strontium, plutonium, it's all there, going into the Pacific, 400 tons a day. It's been that way, in my opinion, since nearly day one. There's a river of groundwater flowing under that wrecked plant into the Pacific. Now, I did some calculating on that in terms of kilograms per ton and so forth, and it seems to me that if you take the 400 tons a day and multiply that out, going back 2.5 years, you come up with about 360,000 tons of liquid death into the Pacific Ocean. Take that a little further and you come up with about 100 million gallons to date. Now, I think that 400 tons a day is probably half of what's really happening, or less than half. So it could easily be 200 million gallons of liquid, heavily concentrated liquid death poured into the Pacific. And do remember, please, dear friends, dilution is not the solution. This stuff doesn't dilute all over the Pacific Ocean. It tends to hang together as it moves across the North Pacific and the Kuroshio North Pacific Current and the other currents that are subtending to that. It's just really unbelievable what's going on. And now finally, I think partly to what we've been doing here and what Dr. Bill's been doing, the MSM is now, we'll see how long they stay with it, the MSM has been forced to begin to cover this. And TEPCO begging, literally begging now for the world to help it. What does that tell you? That tells you the catastrophe could be 10, 20 times worse than we even think it is. They can't get those nuclear cores out of the ground, however deep they are, if they wanted to. They can't even find them, first of all. So it's really grim. Bill, welcome back.
Yeah, we have to, whenever I see a challenge to the world like this, we have to ask a bunch of questions. Well, you know, the journalistic questions are why now? Number two, why have they done nothing? Yeah, you know, these are kind of stark questions. And it's not just a disaster, which, of course, nuclear disasters, as the longer they last of this type, China syndrome we call it, the bigger and the more disastrous they get. So the most nagging questions are, why has the lame-brain media, other than your show, my show, the Nuclear Medical Report, on Thursday afternoons and Fridays, and Arnie Gunderson, we're basically the only sentinels out there asking questions with people like Uichi Shimatsu, Michael Collins, yourself. And why have the lame-brain media, why has the U.S. government, Obama, have no comment at all? Why do the senators that I've contacted, including Senator Wyden in Oregon, Senator Feinstein, and even my congressman, Darrell Issa, who I basically threatened to sue if he didn't close down San Onofre. But San Onofre is on the San Jacinto Fault upthrust zone with 60-plus years of nuclear fallout material. And that, by the way, that reactor, even though they, quote, shut it down, it's still hot. That reactor could still explode between now and the next year, 2 years, and it's going to have to be sat on, babysat for years.
Yeah, years and years.
Yeah. Now the problem is this. You want to ask some questions. I tell people the most important thing isn't just the data, it's asking the real tough questions like, why, after 2.5 years, is TEPCO making a comment now? And if you sit there just silently and just contemplate, use your imagination, there's three things that can happen. Number one, they know something really bad is soon going to happen. Number two, they realize that they're going to get charged in the International Court of Justice. They probably have heard rumbling. I've heard that the South Koreans are actually filing suit against them in the International Court of Justice and others because the Japanese basically committed international crime by even burning the trash and not even seeking international aid from the United States, International Atomic Energy Agency, or anybody. And our so-called U.S. government are completely useless, even though we're in the tailpipe of this disaster. Now, if you look at the transoceanic currents, a lot of people make the misstatement thinking that the radiation just goes to the northern hemisphere. It goes transpolar. It goes to the Kuroshio current, and there's also a current that goes south toward the western coast of South America, and there's another current that goes directly south across the equator to New Zealand and Australia.
Right. Well, there's a big loop, and as you know, there are two currents that come together almost off Fukushima, ironically, and then they head east across the Pacific, and they're heading. It's called the North Pacific Current, the Kuroshio on the other one. They become the North Pacific Current. They come across and end their journey basically off the coast of northern Washington State, and that is where they split. That current splits.
That's the northern one, but there's another current that goes south, and it actually crosses the equator.
That's the one. That's Ecuador. The southern half of it. It goes straight down. right down
Right.
the coast.
And that goes right, that one doesn't just go along the coast. We're talking about going directly from Japan, directly across the oceans, and directly toward Ecuador, Argentina, and Chile.
Oh, the one that crosses the equator, I got you.
Right. Now what happens is, the two largest remaining fisheries on Earth are now being poisoned. Now, what we people have to understand is this is an extinction level event. And
Yeah,
it's not
damn
just
right
the
it
Pacific
is.
Ocean. Yeah, and if you calculate it out, the Pacific Ocean is about 1/3 of all the oceanic waters covering the whole entire Earth, and about 72% of the Earth is ocean. So it means roughly 23% of the Earth is now covered by radioactive oceans there, but these currents carry that radioactive water over 26 months to every ocean on the planet. So as time goes on, year by year, decade by decade, every ocean will be covered, but also they're poisoning the troposphere. Now, the poisoning has three effects. First is it poisons the recycling of oxygen in the upper atmosphere, and we talked about this with Dane Wigington. The three most serious factors causing the problem with ultraviolet light is, number one, the sun is putting out more radiation in the ultraviolet B, C, and D. That's way bigger than the other factors. Second factor is geoengineering, where they're putting nanoparticles at 73 to 80,000 feet, and it's well above the so-called chemtrails you can see that actually are changing the albedo or reflectance of the Earth that they keep talking about, that get fuzzy and grow big. And the third factor is Fukushima Daiichi with radioactive iodine, radioactive cesium, xenon, krypton, all these gases, argon. What they do is they get in the upper atmosphere and they speed up the reaction of the dissolution of the ozone layer. Now, if we have what's called ozone shock, and I became familiar with this back 40 years ago when I worked under one of the top biologists who was at Dalhousie University and later at the University of British Columbia, and one of the top biologists in the world on UV dangers, and I did research in oceanography. If we have a 45-minute drop of 70% of the ozone layer and an ultraviolet shock to the benthic layer of the ocean, the phytoplankton will die, and there'll be a massive bloom of zooplankton, which will cause a surge of domoic acid. And domoic acid is a non-competitive acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, which means any fish, any whale in the oceans that eats the food chain, gets the zooplankton, domoic acid, they will suffocate in the oceans and die. And the oceans literally will turn red like blood. It's almost like a biblical thing. People need to understand it's not just radioactivity, it's the bloom of these things, it's also the bloom of these toxigenic mold. We're seeing literally the planet Earth, if you want to call it the carrier frequency, the Schumann resonance is quickening because the Earth is in incredible stress right now.
Right.
The Earth is under stress.
Yep.
And we have to understand that we're literally on the edge of a catastrophe. So I think that the reason why DEPO is doing this is they feel such horrifying guilt. They're they're leaning down with a knife like they're going to do harikari, and they have to vent their anger against themselves, finally tell the truth. But the fact is there must be something very catastrophic very soon.
Agreed. They know. Hold on a second, we'll come right back. They know what's coming. They know. The plant is deteriorating, disintegrating as we speak. And we'll come right back. Believe it, TEPCO knows what's happening. They've been using duct tape and throwing Band-Aids at this for 2.5 years. They know the game is up. They know they can't stop it. They don't know where the 3 melt-through cores are. 100 tons each. They're straight down most likely. And there is a river of groundwater passing right through and around those pieces, becoming deadly in their irradiated condition and going right into the ocean. So TEPCO's begging now. They know. It's over. It's too late.
The thing is they keep on pretending that there is no solution. And I'm going to run through technically what the solution is. Technically. So there's technical nuclear experts out there, nuclear radiation plant experts. They'll know what I'm going to say makes sense. The first thing is, what they did is they flooded the place with water. Water is the enemy. The enemy in several ways. Firstly, when you have water with fuel rod assemblies with zirconium, you're going to generate tritium. Tritium slows neutrons that are being released from fissionable material and increases criticality. The other thing is these neutrons are released anneal materials, including concrete and metal, and make them turn into crystals that fracture and lose their tensile strength and they're therefore fall over or break apart. So you have to get rid of water. What they've done is put millions of tons of water. And I think the numbers that we're talking about are far bigger. My guess is the real number is probably 10 times higher than the radiation level they're saying. The other thing is
10
they're
times.
filtering. They're also filtering certain isotopes. Radioactive cesium is an analog of magnesium and potassium. So what happens is you expose an animal to it, it causes cardiac arrhythmias, irritation and inflammation, and free radicals of the circulatory system, and it causes cardiac arrest. It also concentrates as potassium in glandular tissues, especially in gerbils when they did research on this, and small mammals, and causes breast cancer, brain cancer, pancreatic cancer. Any glandular tissue, you get a super concentration of cesium. It's incredibly genotoxic. And then when we have strontium, 90, when it breaks down, it releases yttrium, and it's the most high-energy beta particle emitter pretty well known. And that is so powerful, when it even hits lead, it generates X-rays. So you can't even have it in an area like a normal X-ray department, because if you have somebody with strontium-90 poisoning, they'll actually generate so many X-rays it's toxic to go into the room. So what people understand, each of these has a different characteristic, and they're only we've been even filtering a part of them. So what they did was basically a paper mache kind of Western kind of studio kind of game with the public, that they've done anything. In fact, on the weekend, and I think you were one of the first to say this, what do they do on the weekend at TEPCO? They go home.
Go home.
They put a chain lock on the fence and go home. So what the latest stupid move they made was to actually create a wall and then continue to pump in lots of water, which made the groundwater come up, which now makes it so radioactive that they can't get a physical person in there. And they're losing highly technical agents that even know what the site used to be like. So, people say, hey, you have to ask the right questions. Why? The reason is threefold. Number one, Agenda 21, population reduction. Number two, they need a catastrophe to justify what they're really doing, because TEPCO is a front for the Japanese development of advanced nuclear weapons for a future war with China and Russia. And people need to grasp the largest supply of nuclear materials on the earth outside of Russia and America, Japan, even more than Israel. And the Japanese have got the most advanced, outside the United States, the European rocket systems for putting up satellites.
TEPCO officials say they've known for more than 2 years that the tank that leaked radioactive water was standing on shaky ground. They say in a test carried out in July 2011, the tank sank 20 centimeters. They're now looking into whether that had anything to do with the latest leak. The officials say the tank may have become deformed or damaged when it sank. They say a contractor had confirmed that there were no problems with it. After that, TEPCO workers disassembled the tank and reassembled it at the current site. The officials say there are 2 other tanks that also sank during tests. No radioactive water has been found leaking from them, but workers will still transfer the contaminated water to different tanks as a precautionary measure.
I want to talk about Fukushima and everybody coming out. Oh, we were misled to believe they're so-called environmental expert. How is this fucking guy an environmental expert? How are any of them? And I want everybody who's the newbies coming into this has been retorted in exact detail by me from the day it happened. Fox knew, the BBC knew, Reuters knew, ABC, NBC, they all knew in factual detail.
Concerns over a toxic water leak at Japan's Fukushima nuclear plant are now intensifying. That is because the country is getting ready to push the nuclear accident warning level to 3, which means it is classified as serious. That is the highest level it has been since the huge earthquake and tsunami triggered the massive meltdown back in 2011.
Plumegate, I call it the Pacific genocide.
The situation is so troubling, Japan's top nuclear official is now comparing that plant to a house of horrors. Chad Myers explains the warning level here at Fukushima is jumping now from 1 to 3. So what does that tell us? What does that mean, Chad?
There was a water leak at one of those large barrels that you see, those big white things that were just on the screen. Think about, like, you know, those oil tanks around the United States where the oil is stored. Those big tanks, they're all through here, many of them storing the water that is pumped into the system to cool it, then pumped back out. But it's so radioactive when it comes out, you can't just dump it somewhere. You have to put it in these big, giant barrels. Like 1,000 tons of water can go into each one. They use 300 tons of water each day. day. Well, one of these was actually leaking, and into this pool it was separated. It wasn't like leaking out just everywhere, but it was probably leaking into the ground as well, at least for a little while, about 300 tons of water. So because of that leak, they're considering taking this from what was just a current level of a 1. Now remember, Fukushima and also Chernobyl were both level 7s. Major radioactive launches into the atmosphere. This was an ugly, ugly event. So it was a 7. But after the cleanup, a couple of years, now it's back down to a 1.
What do you want?
Do not let these journalistic whores off the hook.
But with this dumping or this losing of some of the water and possibly into the groundwater and into the ocean eventually, this could go up to the 3. 3 Mile Island was a 5, 7, the only 2 7s we've had, Chernobyl and Fukushima. So it's not over. I mean, this may take 1,000 years to truly clean up everything.
Let's lay this out. Look, CNN knew in detail. They refused to report it.
So we're going to have these little bumps in the road without a question.
Wow, still a very dangerous situation. Thank you, Chad. Appreciate that.
Hello there, welcome to Newsline. It's Thursday, August 22nd. I'm Catherine Kobayashi in Tokyo. The people who operate the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant are wrestling with yet another challenge. They'd already confirmed that more than 300 tons of highly radioactive wastewater has leaked from a storage tank, and now they say it may have flowed into the Pacific Ocean.
I've read the study over and over. How many times have I read the study right here of the international team that was over there in June? Plutonium in the water column, 300 meters down, 40 miles out. Their conclusion, that plutonium is into the current. In June of 2011.
Workers with Tokyo Electric Power Company detected high levels of radiation inside a ditch. The ditch is about 50 meters from the leaking tank, and it runs into the ocean. Workers have set up hundreds of tanks on a hillside near the reactors. They erected a low wall around the tanks. Still, the water seeped out. Officials at Japan's Nuclear Regulation Authority said they're considering raising their severity rating of the leak. They rated it as a level 1 incident on the international scale that runs from 0 to 7. They're considering raising their assessment to level 3 for serious incidents.
When do you want it?
Understand, Fukushima has been pushed into the Pacific every day for 890 plus days.
Previously, TEPCO officials had said it was unlikely that contaminated water was reaching the shore. They said the level of radioactive substances in the ocean was not as high as that on land.
The IAEA, the UN, who's the World Health Organization, which is really the World I Want to Kill You organization, they made the decision to push it into the Pacific on day 3. Pawn it off on the U.S. I cannot overstate this.
Officials at the International Atomic Energy Agency have been tracking developments at the plant. They've expressed their concerns. The people at the world's nuclear watchdog issued a statement saying they view the matter seriously and they're ready to provide assistance.
This has killed so many people in the U.S. now. My work shows over 200,000. And do you think I'm over it? Oh, no. That's a low.
They say Japanese authorities are supplying them with information, and experts at the agency are following the issue closely.
Our third story out front, a nuclear crisis. Tonight, Japan on the verge of classifying a toxic water leak at the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant a level 3 serious incident. That would be the highest warning since the massive meltdown following the earthquake and tsunami, those images now so famous around the world.
Don't you think it's ironic, as I go off and go crazy, give the very first report on Earth about this? I lay it out in detail. I lay out their dumping plutonium in on the 3rd of April 2011 when it comes out 12/12/12. As I listened to the hearings in Japan, I had Mikado translating for me. And they come out, they were dumping. They did their first illegal massive dump on April 3rd.
Our Kyung-la was the first American broadcaster to report from inside the Fukushima plant right after the meltdown. And I want to play a portion of that extraordinary report.
We wore head-to-toe protective gear, full facial respirators, and hazmat suits. And then we drove up to the world's worst nuclear accident in 25 years.
This is our first look on the ground at the reactors. This is the heart of the nuclear problem in Japan. What you're seeing over my shoulder are the reactors. There are 4 of them. The 2 that you see over my right shoulder, those are 2 of the reactors that exploded in the early days of this disaster.
And Kyung La is out front here with me tonight. I mean, Kyung, just amazing to watch that, the courage it would take, because it's one of those things you don't at that moment necessarily feel the risk that you're taking, and it could have such a serious toll. 2.5 years since this crisis. How serious is this, that this is happening now?
This is very serious for this particular agency, the Japan Regulation, the Nuclear Regulation Authority. They don't take these moves lightly. So the fact that they're moving it from a level 1 to a level 3, this is very serious. This is very important, and the global community should take note. They even called the nuclear plant a house of horrors. So there is a ton of radioactive water that's being put into the ocean, this leak. So yes, it's very, very serious.
All right, so you talk about that they're saying house of horrors. And as you say, they're not prone to hyperbole there. So that, I mean, an unbelievable thing to say. Radioactive water's been just dumping into the Pacific Ocean. I mean, it sounds incredibly frightening. So how scared should people be?
Well, if you look at how the communities around Japan, the other countries around Japan have reacted, and you've seen them, ban Japanese products, ban Japanese cars, tea, anything that is Japanese,
wow,
in the immediate aftermath, and that fear is still there. You talk to Japanese merchants in Hong Kong, they say, oh, it's hurting our business. This isn't going to help them. But one thing for people to keep in mind is that the people most at risk are the ones who work at the plant. There's a big ocean between us and Japan.
Hey, you want it?
These guys all knew. They participated, and even worse than this. Because you guys, I mean, it's been right in your face. I've shoved it right down your throat. You know, everybody says, oh, you're so extreme, that turned out. So you went over to Janice. She did it humorously. You went over to Patrick Henry. He did it intelligently. We did it laid out. You could have picked any one of your freaking sick demographics you could feed. You refuse to believe in the truth because you don't want the, you can't handle the fucking truth.
Which is kind of amazing when you think about how horrible these things are, just the fact that there's a resiliency in Mother Nature for this kind of thing. I mean, on a personal note, I just want to look at that video again of you in that suit. I mean, that suit's fine and good, right? But that's not exactly going to protect you if something's really wrong, and that's something you knew. You were going into a really dangerous area. It took a lot of risks and a lot of courage. How worried were you?
Well, we're journalists. We want to be at the story, right?
That's right.
You've been there too. You want to go and cover it. I was wearing a dosimeter. You had to watch your clock. It was, you may notice that it was almost rushed as I was talking because we had to do it so quickly. So, you know, that was something you had to watch. You had to look at how much radiation your body was taking in because those suits don't protect you. I was breastfeeding at the time. I didn't breastfeed my son for about a week after that because I was, you know, concerned. I just wanted to make sure. And even when the initial disaster happened, the triple meltdown, I was pregnant. So, you know, you had to weigh what's the risk of covering the story versus the benefit for the public. So, I mean, I chose to stay.
Who's your daddy?
And they make a lot of money. That's what this is all about. They don't want to report and tell the freaking truth because, God forbid, their pyramid, their glass house is going to come tumbling down. They're going to expose to their spouse. They're going to expose to their kids. They're going to expose to their grandkids. Their life is a total fucking fraud.
Right. No, but obviously a really courageous choice. All right. Well, Kyung La, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Chances are you probably do not recognize this guy. Look familiar? Anything? You may not recognize his face, but his name will ring a bell, especially if you live on the West Coast. This is Charles Francis Richter, as in the Richter scale. Charles Richter is the namesake of the scientific method once widely used to determine how strong an earthquake is. 7.1 on the Richter scale, 8.3 on the Richter scale, right? This is the guy. And if you do something that cool in life, your gravestone is likely to be this cool after your life. Look. Charles Francis Richter, seismologist. He devised the scale by which the magnitude of earthquakes is measured. Yeah, what'd you do with your life? Charles Richter may have passed away 30 years ago, but his scale lives on, as does the scale that was developed by this gentleman, Japanese-American researcher named Ted Fujita. Mr. Fujita is the F in the EF tornado scale. When you hear that an EF5 tornado has just touched down somewhere, that rating is based on Ted Fujita's scale. Disaster scales, these rating systems, they help give us perspective on how bad a given disaster is. If something is a 1 on a scale versus a 5, that tells us how seriously we need to react, how we can rank that disaster against others. I've always thought that the granddaddy of all the doomsday disaster scales was this one. This is the nuclear disaster scale. When this scale's in the news, something's gone really wrong. It goes from 1, which is labeled an anomaly, that's the green part down at the bottom, all the way up to 7, which is a major accident, that's the red part at the top. In the history of this scale, there have only been 2 incidents that have reached a level 7. One was Chernobyl, the nuclear meltdown that took place in the Soviet Union in 1986. The other one was Fukushima, the nuclear disaster that hit Japan 2.5 years ago. The March 2011 nuclear meltdown in Japan was triggered by an earthquake and a tsunami. It was the most serious nuclear accident the world has seen since Chernobyl, a 7 out of 7 on the nuclear accident scale. Fukushima was basically a slow-motion radioactive horror film that stretched on for months. But finally, in December 2011, 9 months after the initial incident happened, Japan declared that everything was cool.
What do you want?
What do you think all the hairspray is about? Do not let these fucking journalists off the hook. Oh, we were the fuck they were misled. They were not misled. They are the problem. I've termed it black and yellow journalism.
They said their crippled nuclear plant was finally stable. All good. Mission accomplished. Shortly after that, Fukushima was downgraded from a 7 on the nuclear scale all the way down to a 1. It went from major accident to anomaly.
When do you want it?
They refuse to fucking report this. This is murder.
And that is where the continuing cleanup efforts have remained until today. Despite saying that everything was cool at Fukushima a year and a half ago, things are not cool there. Things, in fact, seem to be spiraling slightly out of control. The Fukushima complex has hundreds of storage tanks on site that have been collecting radiation-contaminated water from the plant ever since the reactors there were decommissioned. The water that's used to cool down the plant's highly radioactive fuel rods gets pumped into these giant storage tanks, where it can then presumably be decontaminated. At least that's the idea. But earlier this week, crews at Fukushima noticed a number of big puddles forming outside one of those big storage tanks. Highly radioactive, contaminated water leaking uncontrollably into the ground. The water was so radioactive that a person standing close to it for an hour would get an amount of radiation that a plant worker is only allowed to be exposed to over the course of 5 years. Today, Japanese officials confirmed that the giant storage tank in question has leaked 300 tons of radioactive water. 300 tons of highly radioactive water have escaped into the surrounding area. And this is not the first issue that they have had when it comes to leaking radioactive water. Last month, the company that owns the plant confirmed that hundreds of tons of contaminated groundwater were not just leaking, but leaking into the ocean that we all share.
The Pacific genocide is very real.
This new crisis at Fukushima, with all the radioactive contaminated water leaking everywhere, has led the Japanese government to escalate the situation there from a level 1 event to a level 3 event, which is described as a serious incident. For context, the 3 Mile Island nuclear disaster in the United States back in 1979, that was a level 5 incident. What's happening at Fukushima right now is the most serious crisis since the original meltdown took place 2.5 years ago. This was a really, really bad thing when it happened. It is still out of control right now, just for some perspective.
You're journalistic fucking whores. Marine biologists and all you fucking journalistic whores, do not let these fuckers off the hook. This has been pointed to Pacific the entire fucking time. You see one single marine biologist report out of the 300 marine biology departments in the United States reporting anything, not yay or nay. What is the statistical probability of that? I'm a stats guy. Get out and run your regression. It's impossible. They fucking know! They know! But they're willing to kill their own family, they're willing to kill their own fucking loved ones, they're willing to kill themselves to fucking protect. That's the hairspray. That's the problem! We have no fucking real leaders that have any intelligence and have any strength. Stay untuned.
How do you want it? Who's your daddy?